General Matthews barely noticed the soldier adjusting the scope on her Barrett 050 at the far corner of the armory. It was just another routine maintenance task. But as his gaze fell on the small badge pinned to her uniform, a chill ran down his spine, and he froze mid-step. What he didn't know was that Master Sergent Sarah Chen wasn't just another marksman. She was about to make the impossible shot with precision that defied every known rule. This wasn't a mission. This was destiny. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the sterile briefing room at Fort Bragg in the United States military. General Marcus Thompson strode into the room, his chest adorned with ribbons that told stories of 3 decades of service. His eyes swept across the assembled special operations team, pausing briefly on each operator before moving to the next. When his gaze reached Sarah, it lingered for a fraction of a second on the small badge pinned to her uniform, a crossed rifle with a scope. The sniper badge? He froze at the spot before he could even make an order. "Ladies and gentlemen," the general began, his gravelly voice filling the room, "we have a situation developing in the mountains of eastern Afghanistan. Intelligence indicates a high-value target will be meeting with local insurgent leaders in 72 hours. This individual has been responsible for coordinating attacks that have cost us 17 American lives in the past 6 months." Sarah's fingers unconsciously traced the worn leather bracelet on her wrist, a gift from her grandfather before his passing. Master Sergeant William Chen had been one of the original members of MACVSOG during Vietnam, a ghost who operated in the shadows when such units didn't officially exist. He'd taught her to shoot when she was 12, setting up tin cans in Montana wilderness where they'd spend entire summers tracking elk and learning the art of patience. "The meeting location is here," General Thompson continued, pointing to a satellite image on the screen. "A compound built into the mountainside, elevation 9,000 feet. The nearest viable insertion point for a strike team is 2 clicks away, across a valley with 0 cover. Any approach would be detected long before reaching effective engagement range." Captain Jake Morrison, the team leader, leaned forward. "What about air support, sir?" "Negative. The target has been using human shields, women and children from nearby villages. Collateral damage is unacceptable. We need surgical precision." Sarah studied the terrain map, her mind automatically calculating distances, wind patterns, and angles. The compound sat like an eagle's nest, with clear sight lines in every direction. It was a sniper's nightmare, or dream, depending on perspective. "Sir," she spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but clear. "What's the maximum engagement distance from the nearest concealed position?" General Thompson's aide pulled up another image. "Best we can determine, 2,100 meters from this ridgeline here. But that's well beyond effective range, especially with the altitude and unpredictable mountain winds." A few operators exchanged glances. The longest confirmed sniper kill in U.S. military history was 2,300 meters, achieved under ideal conditions with specialized equipment. This would be nearly impossible. Sarah nodded slowly, her mind already working through the calculations. At that altitude, the thin air would affect bullet trajectory. The mountain winds could gust up to 40 miles per hour, changing direction without warning. Temperature variations between the valley floor and the compound could create thermal layers that would bend light and affect targeting. Most snipers would call it impossible. But Sarah wasn't most snipers. "I'll need a spotter," she said simply. General Thompson's eyebrows rose slightly. "Sergeant Chen, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but perhaps we should consider alternative." "Sir, with respect," Captain Morrison interrupted, "if anyone can make that shot, it's Chen. I've seen her training scores." The general's eyes narrowed. "Training scores are one thing, Captain. This is—" "Sir," Sarah stood, her small frame somehow commanding attention. "My grandfather once told me that the impossible shot is just the one you haven't taken yet. Give me 48 hours to prep, and I'll eliminate your target." The room fell silent. General Thompson studied her face, searching for bravado or uncertainty. He found neither, only the quiet confidence of someone who had spent their entire life preparing for moments like this. "Very well," he said finally. "Sergeant Chen, you'll have your spotter and whatever equipment you need. But understand this. If you miss, we lose our only chance at this target. He'll disappear and more Americans will die." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I don't miss, sir." As the briefing continued with logistics and support elements, Sarah's mind drifted to those summer days in Montana. Her grandfather's weathered hands guiding hers on the rifle stock, his voice soft in her ear, "Breathing is everything, little warrior." The rifle is part of you. The bullet is your will made manifest. When you truly understand this, distance becomes irrelevant. She'd been 15 when she made her first 1,000-yard shot, dropping a steel target that her grandfather's hunting buddies had sworn she couldn't hit. By 18, she was out shooting Marine Corps instructors at Quantico. But she'd kept her abilities understated, preferring to let her actions speak when necessary. The briefing concluded, and as operators filed out, General Thompson approached her. "Sergeant Chen, a word." She stopped, turning to face him. "I've seen a lot of snipers in my time," he said quietly. "What makes you think you can do what others can't?" Sarah considered the question. How could she explain the thousands of hours spent in Montana wilderness? The way her grandfather had taught her to read wind patterns in the movement of grass, to feel the rhythm of her heartbeat and fire between the beats? How could she describe the almost mystical connection she felt with her rifle, as if it were an extension of her will? "Because I have to, sir," she said finally. "Those 17 Americans who died, they had families. This target will keep killing unless someone stops him. If that means making an impossible shot, then that's what I'll do." General Thompson nodded slowly. "Your file is interesting, Sergeant. Lots of redacted sections. Lots of operations where you were present, but your role was classified. Someone's been keeping you in the shadows." "I work better there, sir. I'm beginning to see that." He paused. "Your spotter will be Sergeant First Class Rodriguez. He's the best we have. You'll deploy tomorrow night. Good luck, Sergeant Chen." As Sarah left the briefing room, she touched her grandfather's bracelet again. Somewhere, she knew he was watching. The little girl who'd learned to shoot tin cans in the Montana mountains was about to attempt something that would push the very limits of what was possible. But then again, she'd been preparing for this moment her entire life. The MH-47 Chinook helicopter thundered through the Afghan night, its rotors beating a steady rhythm against the thin mountain air. Sarah checked her equipment for the third time, her hands moving with practiced efficiency over her custom-built rifle. The Accuracy International AXMC chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum had been modified to her exact specifications, the trigger tuned to break exactly 2.5 pounds, the stock adjusted to fit her smaller frame perfectly. Beside her, Sergeant First Class Miguel Rodriguez studied weather data on his tablet. A decade older than Sarah, Rodriguez had spotted for some of the best shooters in the military. He'd initially been skeptical when assigned to work with the quiet sergeant, but her reputation had preceded her, whispered stories of impossible shots made in training, of perfect scores under conditions that had defeated everyone else. "Wind's going to be a problem," he said, showing her the data. "Gusting up to 45 miles per hour at the target elevation. And these mountain thermals." He shook his head. "It's like trying to shoot through a washing machine." Sarah nodded, her eyes closed as she visualized the shot. In her mind, she could see the bullet's path, a graceful arc through the chaotic air currents. Her grandfather had taught her to think in terms of energy and intention, to see the invisible forces that most shooters only guessed at. 2 minutes to insertion, the crew chief called out. They fast-roped into a narrow valley, the helicopter disappearing into the night as quickly as it had come. The hike to their position would take 6 hours through some of the most unforgiving terrain on Earth. They moved in silence, Sarah leading the way with an almost preternatural ability to find the best path through the darkness. As they climbed, her mind drifted to a conversation with her grandfather when she was 16. They'd been tracking a wounded elk through heavy snow, following blood drops that were barely visible. "How do you always know which way it went, Grandpa?" she'd asked. "Because I don't just look with my eyes, little warrior. I feel with my spirit. The land speaks if you know how to listen. The wind carries stories. When you shoot, you're not just aiming at a target, you're connecting with everything between you and it." Now, years later and half a world away, she understood what he meant. They reached their position as the first hints of dawn touched the eastern peaks. The hide site was a natural depression in the rocks, offering concealment, and a clear line of sight to the compound 2,147 meters away. Sarah began setting up her rifle while Rodriguez assembled his spotting scope and range-finding equipment. "Jesus," Rodriguez whispered as he glassed the compound. That's really far, Chun. I mean, I've seen long shots, but with this wind." Sarah said nothing, focusing on her breathing as she settled behind the rifle. Through her scope, the compound appeared tiny, heat shimmer already beginning to distort the image even in the cool morning air. She could see guards moving on the walls, unaware they were being watched by death itself. They spent the entire day observing, learning the patterns of life in the compound. Sarah took detailed notes on wind patterns, watching how dust devils formed in the valley, and tracking the flight of birds to understand the invisible currents of air. Rodriguez called out temperature readings every hour, building a profile of the thermal layers between them and the target. You know, Rodriguez said during a quiet moment, I've spotted for 8 different snipers over the years. Never seen anyone prep like you do. It's like you're, I don't know, communing with the mountain or something. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. My grandfather was half Cherokee. He used to say that everything is connected. The shooter, the rifle, the bullet, the air, the target. Most people see them as separate things. He taught me to see them as one system. And that works. We'll find out tomorrow. That night, they took turns sleeping, though Sarah found herself mostly awake, feeling the rhythm of the mountain. The wind had its own personality here, playful and fierce by turns. She listened to its song, learning its moods. At 0500, Rodriguez woke to find Sarah already in position, her eye to the scope. Target supposed to arrive at 0800, he said, settling in beside his spotting scope. He'll be early, Sarah said with quiet certainty. Men like him don't trust even their allies. He'll arrive before the others to set up his own security. Rodriguez was about to ask how she could know that when movement caught his eye. Vehicle approaching from the east. You called it. Through her scope, Sarah watched a dusty Toyota Land Cruiser navigate the mountain road. Her breathing slowed, her heartbeat dropping to a steady rhythm. The world narrowed to the small circle of her scope. Wind reading, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 15 miles per hour from the northwest at our position. But look at the flags on the compound. They're showing 25 from the west. There's a sheer layer about halfway. Sarah made minute adjustments to her scope, her mind calculating the complex mathematics of external ballistics. At this range, the bullet would be in flight for nearly 3 seconds. 3 seconds for wind, gravity, air density, and the Coriolis effect to act upon it. 3 seconds that would determine success or failure. The Land Cruiser stopped. Men emerged and Sarah's scope found their target, a tall man with a graying beard, surrounded by bodyguards. He stood in the courtyard, gesturing as he spoke with the compound's defenders. Range confirmed at 2,147 meters, Rodriguez whispered. Temperature 62 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity 15%. Elevation difference negative 347 feet. Wind now gusting to 30 at the compound. Sarah's world contracted to the crosshairs of her scope. She could feel her grandfather's presence, his steady hand on her shoulder. The impossible shot. The one that couldn't be made. But Sarah had been making impossible shots since she was 12 years old. Spotter ready, Rodriguez said, his voice tense with anticipation. Sarah's finger found the trigger, taking up the first stage. Her breathing stopped at the natural pause between exhale and inhale. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, and she counted the spaces between beats. The wind gusted, flags snapping violently at the compound. Most snipers would have waited for calmer conditions. But Sarah could feel the pattern in the chaos, could sense the brief moment of stillness that would come. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind. The wind is not your enemy, little warrior. It's your dance partner. Learn its rhythm and move with it. She waited, patient as the mountain itself, her finger resting on the trigger with exactly 2.4 pounds of pressure. Just 1/10 of a pound, and the rifle would speak. The moment came like a whisper from the universe. The wind stilled for just an instant, the flags at the compound drooping. Sarah's finger completed its journey. The rifle pushed back against her shoulder with familiar violence. Through her scope, she watched the bullet's vapor trail arc across the valley, a nearly invisible thread connecting her to destiny. Send it, Rodriguez breathed, tracking the shot through his spotting scope. Time dilated. 3 seconds became 3 hours. Sarah could see everything. The target turning slightly to speak to a subordinate, the bodyguards scanning the wrong directions, a bird taking flight from the compound wall. The bullet struck with surgical precision, and the target dropped like a marionette with cut strings. For a moment, the compound froze in confusion. Then chaos erupted as men scrambled for cover, firing wildly into the hills, having no idea where death had come from. Holy shit, Rodriguez whispered. Chun, that was impossible. Sarah was already breaking down her rifle with smooth efficiency. We need to move. They'll have patrols out within minutes. As they displaced from their position, beginning the dangerous journey to their extraction point, Rodriguez kept glancing at her with something approaching awe. "How?" he finally asked. "How did you know the wind would stop at that exact moment?" Sarah paused, looking back at the distant compound where men still fired at ghosts. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "I felt it. My grandfather taught me that everything speaks if you listen hard enough. The mountain told me when to shoot." Rodriguez shook his head in amazement. They moved through the terrain like shadows, Sarah leading them on a different route than their approach, anticipating where the enemy would search. Behind them, the compound continued to burn with activity, but their target would coordinate no more attacks, would send no more Americans home in flag-draped coffins. The impossible shot had been made. But for Sarah, it was just another connection between intention and outcome, another dance with the wind her grandfather had taught her to hear. As they reached the extraction point and heard the distant thrum of approaching helicopters, Sarah touched the leather bracelet on her wrist. "Thank you, Grandpa," she whispered to the wind. Somewhere she knew the old warrior was smiling. The debriefing room at Bagram Airfield buzzed with barely contained energy. Word of the impossible shot had spread through the special operations community like wildfire, though officially the mission remained classified. Sarah sat quietly in the corner, still wearing her dusty field uniform, while Rodriguez fielded questions from the assembled intelligence officers. The environmental conditions alone should have made that shot impossible, a CIA analyst was saying, gesturing at weather data on the screen. Wind shear, thermal layers, elevation changes, the margin for error was essentially zero. General Thompson entered the room, and everyone snapped to attention. "As you were," he said, his eyes finding Sarah immediately. "Sergeant Chen, Sergeant Rodriguez, outstanding work. The target's elimination has already disrupted 3 planned attacks." Sarah simply nodded, uncomfortable with the attention. She'd learned long ago that the best operators were the ones whose names never appeared in reports, whose achievements were known only to a select few. "Sir," Rodriguez spoke up, "I've been spotting for 10 years. What Sergeant Chen did out there, it defies explanation. I watched environmental conditions that would have sent any other shooter packing, and she read them like sheet music." General Thompson approached Sarah, studying her with renewed interest. "Walk me through it, Sergeant. Help me understand how you made that shot." Sarah shifted slightly, choosing her words carefully. "Sir, most shooters fight against environmental conditions. They try to force the shot through wind and weather. My grandfather taught me differently. He said the bullet doesn't fight the wind, it rides it. You just have to understand the path." "Your grandfather," the general mused. "Master Sergeant William Chen, MACVSOG, Vietnam. Credited with 47 confirmed kills, though the real number was likely much higher." Sarah's eyes widened slightly. "That information was supposed to be sealed. I pulled some strings," General Thompson explained. "Made some calls to people who don't officially exist. Your grandfather was a legend in certain circles. They called him Ghost Walker because he could infiltrate positions others thought impossible. Seems the apple didn't fall far from the tree." "He never talked about his service much," Sarah said quietly. "Just taught me to shoot and hunt." "He taught you more than that," the general observed. "I've seen your file now, the real one. 32 operations in 6 years, most of them classified, so deep they don't officially exist. Success rate, 100%. You've been operating in the shadows by choice, haven't you?" Sarah met his gaze steadily. "The best shots are the ones nobody knows were fired, sir." A knock at the door interrupted them. A young specialist entered, saluting sharply. "Sir, priority message from JSOC. They're requesting Sergeant Chen's immediate presence at the Tactical Operations Center." General Thompson frowned. "What's this about?" "Sir, there's a developing situation. That's all I was told." 20 minutes later, Sarah found herself in a secure briefing room facing a wall of monitors. Lieutenant Colonel David Harper from Joint Special Operations Command stood at the center, his face grim. "Sergeant Chen, thank you for coming. We have a time-sensitive situation. 40 minutes ago, a convoy carrying a diplomatic team was ambushed in the Korengal Valley. They've taken refuge in an abandoned combat outpost, but they're surrounded. Among the diplomats is Ambassador Catherine Wells, heading the peace negotiations with tribal leaders." Sarah studied the tactical display. The Korengal Valley was known as the Valley of Death, for good reason: steep walls, limited access, and hostile forces who knew every rock and crevice. "Air support?" she asked. "Weather's moved in. Nothing's flying in this soup." Ground reinforcements are 6 hours out minimum. The hostiles are massing for an assault. We estimate the outpost will be overrun within 2 hours. Harper pulled up satellite imagery. However, there's a ridge line here, elevation 8,500 feet. It overlooks the entire valley. If someone could reach that position... That's a 1,900-meter shot into a narrow valley with crosswinds, Rodriguez said, having followed Sarah to the briefing. In fog and rain? Chen, even you. How many hostiles? Sarah interrupted. Estimated 40 to 50 fighters. But Sergeant, the conditions. How many people are we protecting? 12, including Ambassador Wells and her security detail. Sarah was already moving toward the door. I'll need a helicopter to insert on that ridgeline. Rodriguez, you're with me. We'll need thermal optics and match-grade ammunition rated for extreme weather. General Thompson stepped forward. Sergeant Chen, I can't order you to attempt this. The conditions make it a suicide mission. If you're compromised on that ridgeline with no support. Sir, Sarah turned back, her voice calm but firm. My grandfather once told me that warriors don't choose their battles based on odds. They choose them based on necessity. 12 Americans are going to die unless someone acts. That makes it necessary. Within 30 minutes, they were airborne in a modified MH-6 Little Bird, flying nap of the Earth through worsening weather. Sarah had changed into cold weather gear and was running through equipment checks with mechanical precision. Her rifle had been fitted with the advanced thermal scope, its electronics sealed against moisture. Chen, Rodriguez had to shout over the rotors. I've got to ask, why do you do this? You could have any posting you want. Training position, staff job, anything. Why keep taking the impossible missions? Sarah was quiet for a moment, her hand unconsciously touching her grandfather's bracelet. When I was 14, Grandpa took me to the Vietnam Memorial. We stood there for hours while he read names. His friends. His brothers. Men who died because sometimes the impossible shot wasn't made, the impossible mission wasn't attempted. He made me promise that if I ever had the skills to make a difference, I wouldn't waste them hiding behind a desk. The helicopter flared suddenly, the pilot fighting crosswinds as they approached the ridgeline. 30 seconds, he called out. They fast-roped into a wideout, the fog so thick Sarah could barely see Rodriguez 10 feet away. Using GPS and instinct, they found a cluster of rocks that would serve as their position. Far below, through occasional breaks in the fog, muzzle flashes lit up the valley like deadly fireflies. I've got thermal signatures, Rodriguez reported, his voice tight with tension. Multiple hostiles advancing on the outpost. Range, 1,947 meters. Wind is, Christ, it's gusting to 50 knots and shifting every few seconds. Sarah settled behind her rifle, the thermal scope cutting through the fog to reveal the heat signatures of human bodies far below. She could see the defenders' positions, outnumbered and rapidly being encircled. The math was brutal, 12 defenders against 50 attackers. Without intervention, it would be a massacre. The fog is actually helping us, she murmured, her eye pressed to the scope. They won't hear the shots until it's too late. Won't know where we are. Chen, the wind is telling a story, Sarah finished. Watch the fog patterns. See how it swirls. The wind isn't random. It's following the valley contours. There's a pattern. She began to fire with methodical precision. The suppressed rifle coughed, sending death through the swirling mist. Through her thermal scope, she watched heat signatures drop one by one. The attackers had no idea where the shots were coming from, the fog and echoing valley walls making it impossible to locate the source. Target down, Rodriguez confirmed. Adjusting target down. Chun, this is unreal. Sarah's world had narrowed to the rhythm of breath and trigger. Each shot was a calculation of wind, distance, and movement, but more than that, it was an act of will projected across. Nearly 2 kilometers of chaotic air. Her grandfather's lessons flowed through her. The rifle is your voice, the bullet your word. Speak truth across any distance. In 12 minutes, she fired 31 shots. 31 heat signatures went dark. The remaining attackers, realizing they were being systematically eliminated by an unseen force, broke and ran, disappearing into the valley's maze of ravines and caves. Outpost secure, Rodriguez breathed in amazement. Chun, you just did the impossible. Again. Sarah was already packing up her rifle. We need to move. They'll figure out our general position soon enough. As they displaced through the fog toward their extraction point, Rodriguez couldn't help but ask, "How do you do it?" "Really? Because what I just witnessed shouldn't be possible." Sarah paused, looking back through the swirling mist toward the valley, where 12 Americans would live to see another day. "My grandfather believed that everything is connected by invisible threads, the shooter, the target, the space between. He said that when you truly understand this, distance becomes an illusion. You're not sending a bullet across space. You're following a thread that already exists. And you believe that." "I don't have to believe it," Sarah said simply. "I live it." The extraction helicopter found them 40 minutes later, the pilots navigating by instruments alone through the worsening weather. As they lifted off, Sarah caught a glimpse of the combat outpost through a break in the clouds. Figures were moving on the walls, the diplomatic team and their security, alive because someone had made the impossible possible. Back at Bagram, the debriefing was subdued. The mission was so classified that no record would exist beyond a few heavily redacted lines in a file that almost no one would ever see. Ambassador Wells had been saved, the peace negotiations would continue, and the world would never know how close it had come to losing a crucial diplomatic effort. General Thompson found Sarah cleaning her rifle in a quiet corner of the Special Operations compound. 31 confirmed kills in 12 minutes, through fog, at nearly 2,000 meters, he said, shaking his head. "The analysts are calling it statistically impossible." "Statistics assume normal distributions," Sarah replied, not looking up from her weapon. "My grandfather taught me to be an outlier." "The ambassador wants to thank you personally." "No need, sir. I was just doing my job." General Thompson sat down across from her. "You know, in my 30 years of service, I've met maybe 5 people who operate at your level. True apex predators. But you're different. The others I knew, they love the hunt, the kill. You're something else." Sarah finally looked up. "I'm a protector, sir. My grandfather was a warrior because war came to him. He taught me to be ready for when it came to me. Every shot I take is to save lives, not take them. The taking is just the mechanism. And when the war ends, when we finally leave this place." Sarah's hands continued their practice movements, reassembling her rifle with unconscious precision. "Then I'll find another way to protect people. But until then, I'll be here, making the shots others can't." The general stood to leave, then paused. "Your grandfather would be proud, Sergeant Chen." "I know," Sarah said quietly, touching the worn leather bracelet. "I feel him with me every time I look through the scope." As General Thompson walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd been in the presence of something rare, a perfect fusion of skill, purpose, and an almost mystical understanding of the shooter's art. Sarah Chen would never be famous, would never have her name in history books. But in the shadow world where America's most dangerous work was done, she was becoming a legend. The Ghost Walker's granddaughter, the one who made impossible shots possible. The protector who killed from distances that shouldn't exist, guided by wisdom passed down from a warrior who understood that sometimes the most important battles were won by those whose names would never be known. Six months after the Korengal Valley operation, Sarah stood at attention in a nondescript conference room deep within the Pentagon. The walls were bare except for the seal of the United States Special Operations Command. No windows, no decorations, just functional furniture and the weight of secrets. General Thompson was there, along with several other flag officers she didn't recognize. Their uniforms bore no name tags, their faces carefully neutral. These were the men and women who directed America's shadow wars, whose names appeared in no news reports, whose decisions shaped conflicts the public would never know existed. Sergeant First Class Chen, one of them, began, a woman with silver eagles on her shoulders. "You've been brought here for a specific purpose. Your operational record over the past 7 years is unprecedented. 63 missions, 0 failures. Confirmed kills at distances that our ballistics experts say are impossible. More importantly, lives saved. By our count, your actions have directly prevented the deaths of over 200 American and Allied personnel." Sarah remained at attention, saying nothing. "At ease, Sergeant," General Thompson said gently. "Sarah, what we're about to discuss doesn't leave this room." She relaxed slightly, though her bearing remained military precise. The female colonel continued. "We're forming a new unit. Completely black, no official existence. Its mission will be to handle situations that conventional special operations cannot, the truly impossible scenarios where failure means strategic catastrophe. We want you to be one of the founding members." With respect, ma'am, Sarah said carefully, I work well in my current capacity. Your current capacity has you operating alone or with a single spotter, another officer interjected. This unit would give you resources, support, and most importantly, the ability to train others. Your methods, your approach, they could be taught. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Sir, ma'am, what I do can't be taught in a traditional sense. It's not about technique or equipment. It's about understanding. Then help us understand, General Thompson urged. Your grandfather's knowledge will die with you unless you pass it on. The mention of her grandfather made Sarah's hand move unconsciously to her bracelet. She thought of his words, spoken during one of their last hunts together. Knowledge kept secret serves no one, little warrior. When the time comes, you must teach others to see as we see. There's another reason we need you, the female colonel added, sliding a folder across the table. Open it. Inside were satellite images of a compound in Syria, along with intelligence reports. Sarah's trained eye immediately began analyzing the terrain, the angles, the challenges. Hassan al-Rashid, the colonel explained. Former Iraqi Republican Guard sniper, trained by the Soviets in the 1980s. He's been hunting American personnel across the Middle East for the past 5 years. 32 confirmed kills, all at extreme range. The media doesn't know he exists, but he's become a ghost story among our troops. They call him the Devil's Eye. Sarah studied the images more carefully. He's using Soviet-era techniques. See the hide positions? Classic Dragunov doctrine. But he's evolved it, adapted to modern equipment. He's more than that, General Thompson said grimly. Intelligence suggests he's training others. Creating a school for snipers, specifically targeting American forces. We've lost 3 operators trying to get close to him. When? Sarah asked simply. That's the thing, the colonel replied. We don't just want you to eliminate him. We want you to do it in a way that sends a message. Something so impossible, so beyond comprehension, that it breaks the mythology he's building. We need the enemy to fear our capabilities more than they trust in his. Sarah closed the folder. I'll need complete operational freedom. My choice of position, timing, and method. Done. And after, you help us build the unit. Share your knowledge. Become the teacher your grandfather was. Sarah thought of all the shots she'd taken, all the lives saved and lost. She thought of her grandfather's lessons, whispered in Montana wilderness, and how they traveled across continents and conflicts to save Americans who would never know her name. I'll do it, she said finally. But understand, what I teach won't create more of me. Each shooter must find their own way to understand. I can only show them the door. 3 weeks later, Sarah lay prone on a rocky outcrop in the Syrian desert. The hide was impossible, 2,743 meters from al-Rashid's compound, across a valley that shimmered with heat mirages even in the pre-dawn darkness. No one attempted shots at this range in these conditions. The ballistics were too complex, the variables too numerous. Rodriguez was beside her, running calculations on a tablet shielded from any light. Chun, I've run the numbers 6 times. With the heat differentials and the distance, the bullet will be in flight for almost 4 seconds. That's 4 seconds of wind, thermal variation, and the target potentially moving. He'll be stationary, Sarah said with quiet certainty. Every morning at 0547, he performs far prayer on the eastern balcony. He's precise, ritualistic. That's his weakness, patterns. Even so, this distance is necessary, Sarah finished. He has counter-snipers positioned at all the conventional ranges. He knows our doctrine, our typical engagement distances. He won't be looking this far out. She'd spent 2 days in this position, learning the rhythm of the desert, feeling the patterns of wind and heat. Her grandfather's spirit seemed especially close here, in this place of ancient stones and endless sky. You know, Rodriguez said quietly, I've been your spotter for 18 months now. I've seen you do things that shouldn't be possible, but I still don't really understand how. Sarah adjusted her scope minutely, her eye never leaving the target area. My grandfather once told me a story. During his time in Vietnam, he had to take a shot through triple canopy jungle at a target he couldn't even see. Impossible, right? But he didn't aim at the target. He aimed at where the target's spirit touched the world. He said everything alive disturbs the pattern of existence. If you can feel that disturbance, you can follow it back to its source. And that works. I'm here, aren't I? His genes, his teaching, his understanding, they live on. The eastern sky began to lighten almost imperceptibly. Sarah's breathing slowed, her heartbeat dropping to a meditation-like rhythm. Through her scope, the compound remained dark, but she could feel the stirring of activity within. "Wind reading," she whispered. 8 knots from the northeast at our position. Gusting to 12. At the compound. Rodriguez checked his instruments. Estimated 15 to 18 from the east. Sarah made tiny adjustments, her mind calculating not just the mathematics of the shot, but something deeper, the connection between intention and outcome that her grandfather had taught her to feel. "Target emerging," Rodriguez breathed. Through her scope, Sarah watched Hassan al-Rashid step onto the balcony. Even at this impossible distance, she could see his movements clearly through the powerful optics. He laid out his prayer mat with precise movements, unaware that death was watching from beyond the edge of possibility. "Range confirmed at 2,743 meters, Rodriguez whispered. "Temperature 72 degrees. Humidity 23%. Elevation difference positive 127 feet. Wind steady at 15. Sarah's world contracted to the crosshairs. She could feel her grandfather's presence stronger than ever, his weathered hands steady on her shoulders. The impossible shot. The one that would shatter an enemy's mythology and replace it with fear. Al-Rashid knelt on his prayer mat, facing east. He would be still for exactly 45 seconds during this part of the prayer. Sarah had timed it for 2 mornings. Her finger found the trigger. The desert held its breath. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if the universe itself was waiting. Sarah's heartbeat thundered in her ears, lube-dub, and she counted the spaces between, finding that perfect moment of stillness. "Send it," she whispered, more prayer than words. The rifle spoke with a muted crack, the suppressor reducing its voice to a whisper. Through her scope, Sarah watched the vapor trail arc across the valley, a thread of destiny connecting her to the target. For seconds. 4 heartbeats. For moments where past, present, and future converged. Al-Rashid never knew what hit him. The match-grade .338 Lapua round struck with surgical precision, and the man who had terrorized American forces for 5 years crumpled onto his prayer mat. At that distance, his men wouldn't even hear the shot for another 3 seconds. "Impact," Rodriguez confirmed, his voice awed. "Center mass. Chun, that's the longest confirmed kill in history." Sarah was already breaking down her rifle. Records don't matter. Message sent. By the time Al-Rashid's men realized what had happened, Sarah and Rodriguez were ghosts in the desert wind. The extraction went flawlessly, and within 6 hours they were back at the forward operating base. The aftermath was everything the Pentagon had hoped for. Word spread through enemy networks like wildfire. "The devils, I have been killed at an impossible distance by an invisible shooter who struck like divine judgment." The sniper school he'd been building dissolved as students fled, terrified of American capabilities they couldn't comprehend. But for Sarah, the real work was just beginning. The training facility was so classified it didn't appear on any maps. Hidden in the mountains of Colorado, it looked like nothing more than a remote weather station. But beneath the surface, it housed the most advanced sniper training program in the world. Sarah stood on an observation platform, watching 6 candidates work through a complex shooting scenario. Wind machines created artificial gusts, thermal generators produced heat mirages, and targets appeared at ranges that conventional wisdom said were impossible. "They're struggling," observed Master Sergeant Rodriguez, now her assistant instructor. "They're supposed to struggle," Sarah replied. "The easy shots teach nothing." One of the candidates, a young sergeant named Williams, was showing promise. Sarah watched her settle behind her rifle, saw the moment when frustration gave way to something deeper, understanding. "She's feeling it," Rodriguez noted. "Maybe," Sarah said. "We'll see." The unit, officially designated Task Force 88, though it existed in no government database, had been operational for 8 months. Sarah had handpicked each candidate from across the special operations community. Not for their shooting records, but for something indefinable, a capacity to see beyond the mechanical act of marksmanship. "Instructor Chun," a voice called from behind. She turned to see General Thompson approaching, now wearing a 3rd star. "Sir," she acknowledged. "Walk with me, Sarah." They left the observation platform, walking along a trail that wound through the mountain forest. The general was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "The Syrian operation last year, it changed things. Enemy sniper activity has dropped by 60%. They're afraid, Sarah. Afraid of capabilities they can't understand or counter. Fear fades, sir. Eventually someone else will rise. Which is why this program is so important. You're not just training snipers, you're creating a mythology of our own. The idea that American shooters can reach out from impossible distances, that nowhere is safe from our protection or retribution. Sarah touched her grandfather's bracelet, now worn smooth by years of unconscious contact. My grandfather wouldn't have approved of ruling through fear. No, Thompson agreed. But he would have approved of protecting American lives through superior capability. Every enemy sniper who decides not to take a shot because they fear our response, that's lives saved. They stopped at an overlook where the mountains stretched endlessly into the distance. Sarah thought of all the shots she'd taken, all the lives ended and saved. The weight of it should have been crushing, but instead she felt purposeful. I've been thinking about retirement, she said quietly. Thompson looked surprised. You're 32 years old, Sarah. You have years of operational capability left. It's not about capability, sir. It's about purpose. I've taken 127 lives at ranges others say are impossible. I've saved hundreds more. But my grandfather's greatest legacy wasn't the shots he took. It was the wisdom he passed on. Maybe it's time I focused on that. The program needs you. The program needs teachers. I'll stay until this first-class graduates help establish the doctrine and training protocols. But after that, she gestured at the mountains. Maybe it's time I found my own Montana. Found someone to pass the knowledge to the way Grandpa did for me. Thompson was quiet for a long moment. Your service has been extraordinary, Sarah. Whatever you decide, you've earned the right to choose your path. They walked back toward the facility in comfortable silence. As they approached, Sarah could hear the crack of rifles as her students continued their training. One shot stood out, clean, precise, taken at just the right moment between heartbeats. Williams made that shot, Rodriguez reported as they returned. 2,100 meters in shifting winds. She said she stopped trying to fight the conditions and started dancing with them instead. Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile Thompson had seen from her. Good. She's beginning to understand. The graduation ceremony was deliberately small. No media, no publicity, just 6 new operators receiving a small pin, a crosshair surrounded by stars, the symbol of Task Force 88. Each had successfully completed shots beyond 2,000 meters in combat conditions. More importantly, each had learned to see shooting not as a mechanical skill, but as an art form. Sarah stood at the back, out of the spotlight. She wore civilian clothes for the first time in years, having officially retired the week before. Her service record would be sealed, her true contribution to American security known only to a select few. Williams approached after the ceremony. Instructor Chen, ma'am, I wanted to thank you. What you taught us, it changed everything. I only showed you the door, Sarah replied. You walked through it yourself. Remember that the skill is just a tool. What matters is how you use it. Will we see you again? Sarah glanced at Rodriguez, who would be taking over as lead instructor. Maybe, but probably not. The program is in good hands. As the new operators filed out to their assignments, General Thompson joined Sarah one last time. Any regrets? He asked. None, Sarah said firmly. I did what I was called to do. Now others will carry it forward. Where will you go? Montana first. To visit Grandpa's grave, return his bracelet to him. After that. She shrugged. Wherever the wind takes me. Thompson extended his hand. It's been an honor, Sarah. Your country owes you a debt it can never publicly acknowledge. My country owes me nothing, sir. Service was its own reward. As Sarah walked away from the facility for the last time, she felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. Behind her, rifles cracked as the next generation of impossible shooters trained. Ahead, the mountains beckoned with the promise of peace. That night, she camped under the stars, the same stars her grandfather had taught her to navigate by all those years ago. In the distance, a coyote howled, lonely but free. I kept my promise, Grandpa, she whispered to the night. I used the skills. I made the difference. And I passed on the knowledge. The wind picked up, rustling through the pines with a sound like whispered approval. Sarah smiled, closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, slept without dreams of crosshairs and calculations. The legend of the impossible shots would live on, growing with each telling. But Sarah Chen, granddaughter of the Ghost Walker, keeper of ancient wisdom, maker of impossible shots, disappeared into the American landscape as quietly as she had emerged from it. Some warriors are remembered in monuments and medals. Others live on in the skills they pass to the next generation, in the lives saved by shots that shouldn't have been possible, in the whispered stories of those who guard the walls while the nation sleeps. Sarah's war was over. But somewhere in the mountains of Colorado, in the deserts of Syria, in the valleys of Afghanistan, her legacy lived on, one impossible shot at a time. Sometimes the most extraordinary stories are the ones we never hear, the classified operations, the impossible shots, the quiet heroes who guard us while we sleep. If this story of skill, sacrifice, and the passing of ancient wisdom moved you, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that the impossible is just a barrier waiting to be broken. And remember, somewhere out there, in places we'll never know about, extraordinary people are doing impossible things to keep us safe. What impossible shot will you take in your own life today?